The Switch 2 may have just been leaked. News started circulating this morning with images that were posted on a Chinese website, which was then picked up and shared by Reddit, which was then picked up and shared by basically everybody, and it has been spreading like wildfire this morning. And while numerous images as part of this leak are renders, which we'll talk about in a moment, what's important is there are some what look like real photos of parts involved for this system, and alongside with that, a parts list with specs of what's going to be in the system as well. Now, of course, when it comes to stuff like this, heavy grain of salt, but the timing does line up where stuff like this is going to be in production, and yeah, stuff like this leaks sometimes. First things first, the 3D renders. A lot of the images in this post are really more like just mock-ups and not actual photos of the device in question. The reasoning given for this, though, is because alongside the supplied photos, this is coming from someone who is working off of the production line for parts for the system, got photos of some of those parts, as we can see, and then worked up on rendering what the final version looks like. So it might not be perfectly accurate to it, if this is even real in the first place, but that is why so many photos you're seeing are 3D renders, which I obviously understand sets off a few alarm bells of why you might be a little more hesitant to believe them. Certainly had that impact on me, but looking at the total picture of this, there is a logic to why so many of them are renders. Now, the first thing I really want to focus on is the physical design of the system, because this is one of the things that has evoked the most immediate reaction from a lot of people, namely the fact that it looks like a Switch, which on the one hand, what else would you expect from something that everyone's been just kind of hailing as the Switch 2? But I also understand why there is some hesitancy on a system that looks so similar to the previous one. It's not the exact same. If these renders end up being a real depiction of what the system's going to look like, there are some refinements and changes that I'll talk about. But generally speaking, as far as just an immediate first glance goes, yeah, it's pretty identifiably the same general design. Same stick and button placement, same general shape and design, same general Joy-Con shape, although maybe just ever so slightly different, especially to compensate for the larger size of the main body tablet from the looks of it. It has the same style kickstand as the OLED, where it's that full folding bottom half of it. One of the immediate first things that really stood out to me, the fact that we now actually have two USB-C ports. The current Switch only has the single one at the bottom. It's really just meant for the docking mechanism of the system to plug into the Switch dock. Some companies have found other ways of using it, but that's the main goal. Whereas this mock-up shows not only a USB-C port at the bottom in the middle, just like on the current Switch, but also one located at the top. The exact purpose of which, who knows yet? It could just be a convenient way of being able to plug in certain accessories that you want to be able to use with the Switch directly and not necessarily rely on a dock. It'd be used for an alternative style or method of docking. The point is that there's now an additional freed up USB-C port available in the system, which does open up some interesting possibilities. Another thing that stood out pretty prominently to me is that in the designs for the Joy-Cons, and actually one of the real photos we have to work with shows this as well, the inner part of the Joy-Cons where you have that little SL and SR button that are used when you want to use a single Joy-Con by itself like a full controller, those are much more prominent. The ones on the Switch Joy-Cons are teeny tiny, and they've always been a little bit awkward to use in my opinion, when you have to, if you're trying to do things like, you know, do a bunch of Mario Kart with everyone using a single Joy-Con at a time. So having those be more prominent does seem like it could be more useful. Also in that same picture, you can see what looks like maybe little metal contact plates, which lines up with rumors we've heard about the Joy-Cons using a new magnetic system for how they attach and latch onto the Switch. One thing to note as far as button placement goes is that while most of it looks the exact same, there's actually one extra button now located on the right Joy-Con. What exactly this button could be, I don't know. Could be some kind of additional options menu setting, could be some kind of new addition to the home button, could be tied into some kind of gimmick or something the new Switch is capable of. Without really actually seeing this thing in action, all we know for now is there's an extra button, and it does something. I will say that additional button does have the same cutout as the capture button, and so there's a part of me that wonders if maybe it's just a second one, which obviously doesn't have a lot of use when you're using two Joy-Cons, but it could be so that when you're playing multiplayer games and everyone has their own individual Joy-Con, everyone also has their own dedicated capture button. Last but not least, one other physical change that's not the biggest deal. If you look at pictures of the back of the system in the renders, what I assume are the release buttons for the Joy-Cons are much larger and more prominent. Instead of being a button that pokes out of the back, it now has a little protrusion and pokes out the side, so you'd have to wrap your finger around and use that as part of pulling the Joy-Con off. One other change in physical design that isn't immediately noticeable looking at the renders of just the system by itself, there are also size comparisons between this and the original Switch tablet, showing that the main tablet body is in fact larger, which lines up again with rumors we've seen in the past talking about how the next Switch was going to offer an 8-inch screen. That's larger than the body of the current Switch, so it would make sense for it to have a bigger body overall, tying into now having larger Joy-Cons to work with that. Now, like I said, I've seen a few people have some mixed, slightly negative reactions to this idea, and it mostly boils down to two main things: branding and comfort. Starting with comfort, because that actually is the thing that in my mind matters a lot more in the end. While the Switch has always been a very handy portable system, one of the complaints that has happened is that, as a handheld, it's not actually that ergonomically comfortable to play for a long period of time. This is why you're seeing stuff with like all the PC handhelds having these giant protruding grips that you can wrap your hands around, while Switch has chosen to have that very flat body. It's also why that during the Switch's life cycle, we've gotten things like larger third-party Joy-Cons that are way bigger and have an actual grip design to them, unlike the stock ones. The thing is, in my mind, it actually makes sense for the stock Switch to have that style of Joy-Con. I still hope that Nintendo releases some kind of alternative first-party option that is a larger Joy-Con for those people that want to have larger, more comfortable grips. And while this is a style I prefer, it absolutely makes sense that they would stick with the current design to an extent. By having that design, it's something that still makes sense when you use the Joy-Con sideways. If you had a grip design, it would be a lot more awkward to use the Joy-Cons in that single style, and it helps maintain the overall low profile of the Switch, making it easier to fit in a small carrying case or a bag, etc., which is a heavy focus, I think, for Nintendo as far as this is still a portable system. Now, the other thing is a worry about branding, and this has been a worry that I've seen talked about right out of the gate when it comes to what exactly the next Switch is going to be and what Nintendo's going to call it, because everyone is still very heavily scarred by what happened with the Wii U. They basically went from one of their most successful systems, the Wii, to their least successful with the Wii U, and while there are numerous reasons for that happening, a point that a lot of people like to go back to time and time again is branding. The fact that the next system was called very much the same idea, with being the Wii U. It looked somewhat similar to the system except for the addition of the gamepad, and so a lot of people had this branding confusion of, oh, well, that's just a Wii with like an extra tablet, right? I don't need that, I already have a Wii. And that's not the only reason why the Wii U failed the way it did, but it did certainly contribute to an image issue. And so because of that, seeing a Switch that looks very much like just another Switch, there are a lot of people saying how that's going to really end up causing problems for the system at launch, which again, I go back to the concept of, I'm not entirely sure how much different Nintendo would want to make a system design look like this. If the main goal is being a direct successor to the Switch, there are certain concepts that have to remain, having the main tablet body, having detachable Joy-Cons. Sure, there are things they can do with some of the color designs or how to mess with the body a little bit, but at least if this is real, it looks like they've chosen not to go down that path. And so I can understand that worry a little bit. I think it is perhaps a bit overblown at the moment. While the image certainly can have that impact, I think how Nintendo positions and markets this outside of just the visual design is going to have a large impact on that. That comes down to things like how they named the system, how much they emphasize the fact that it is a more powerful system, the Switch, capable of playing games that the regular Switch just can't right now, and honestly just having a strong library to support that right out the gate. Now, as far as the spec and part list go, I don't want to speculate too hard about the power level of the system because that's already been done a lot with past leaks as far as what it sounds like the system is going to be using, and the parts list here does seem to line up with that. The main chip of the system that is listed, a lot of people are assuming is just a part ID for what is actually the Tegra T239, which has long been rumored to be the main chip in the Switch 2, placing it power-wise somewhere ahead of last gen with PS4 and Xbox One, but not quite as powerful as the current PS5 and Xbox Series X, which makes sense given Nintendo's approach. I mean, the original Switch was outdated for its time, and it has stayed relevant for well into 7 years now. Another thing we've been able to glean thanks to this parts list, if it's real though, is that it does also look like the system is going to ship with 12 gigabytes of RAM and an internal storage of 256 gigs, which 256 is not the absolute largest storage by today's standards, but it is quite a bit more than the original Switch shipped with. With that system, even if you focused on primarily using physical, you're going to fill that storage up thanks to just digital-only titles, updates, and DLC alone. So 256 is something where if you're relying on physical, yeah, that's probably going to get you pretty far. If you are pivoting in an all-digital direction, probably still going to need to expand that storage eventually. Which, on that note of physical versus digital, the mock-ups for the system do show the same kind of game card slot that the current Switch has, so while the card design itself might still be updated and changed in some minor way, similar to what Nintendo has done with systems like the DS to the 3DS, it looks like they are going to be continuing to support physical this next generation. We are not pivoting to a digital option just yet. As with all leaks like this, again, heavy grain of salt, always be a little skeptical, always look for what Nintendo themselves are going to be actually officially showing off. But this particular one has been spreading so quickly, it just felt like, yeah, we should probably talk about what's showing up in this one. If it does end up being the real deal, it definitely lines up with a lot of the previous rumor and speculation we've heard about the system in regards to it being a fairly safe, straightforward upgrade compared to the current Switch. It does not look like Nintendo is trying to completely reinvent the system. It's always possible there is some kind of additional feature or functionality that we just can't see on the physical design of it that could be reflected in the final version. But as far as just the physical design of the system goes, yeah, it looks like we're getting another more powerful Switch. I will say that if this leak is real, I'm very curious if it's going to impact Nintendo's own plans for revealing it. There's been all kinds of speculation of, oh, the next Switch is going to be revealed this month in September. No, it's going to be next month. No, it's going to be early next year. All kinds of different talk of when this thing could get revealed, and I'm just sitting here waiting for Nintendo to actually say something themselves. And while that reveal could have been planned for this month, I wonder if Nintendo is just going to reveal it sooner than originally planned because of this. So that's the Switch 2 leak from this morning. I'm very curious how this is going to line up with the final version of the system, if it's remotely accurate at all in the first place. The only way we're really going to know that for sure is when Nintendo officially unveils it. But until then, let me know what you all think down below in the comments. If this is the direction the next Switch is going to go, are you glad that it effectively looks like the same thing as the regular Switch, but more powerful? Do you wish it was something a bit more different or unique? Let me know down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you all later.